Among the many unique aspects of Carnatic music is accompaniment. Now, accompaniment itself is not unique to Carnatic music, but the kind of accompaniment that we find in Carnatic music is certainly unique. All kinds of music, all genres of music are described as are described in terms of one or more lead performers with some accompaniment. So, if you have, say, a film song, you would have one or two playback singers with a whole orchestra that accompanies them. Folk music, again, you will have one or two or a group of lead performers, and you will have accompaniment, percussive, melodic. In classical music, Western classical music, you have pieces that are meant for one or two instruments with another instrument accompanying it. So, what is accompaniment? This literally it is to accompany the lead performer. And in Carnatic music, you would have seen that we have a lead performer, either a vocalist or a veena player or a violinist or a flute player and so on. And the lead performer is always seated in the center and the accompanists are seated on the sides. We have percussive accompaniment, we have melodic accompaniment. These are the two kinds of accompaniment that we have in Carnatic music. Now, what is unique about this is that this accompaniment involves a great deal of, it entirely hinges around the shared tradition, knowledge of a shared tradition, and a great deal of anticipation and alertness during the concert. That is, there is rarely, if ever, any rehearsal. The lead performer and the accompanist almost never get together to rehearse for a particular concert. They may jam together on other occasions, but a given concert, it's very rare that, in fact, the more seasoned performers never need a rehearsal, they don't rehearse together. Nor is there, obviously, nor is there any written score that the performers can follow. So, the performers meet on stage and create music. Now, how is this possible? Because, as I said, of two things. One is, the main thing is, of course, the shared tradition. While the melodic accompanist is also expected to have internalized many compositions. Quite often in a concert, the lead performer may perform a composition that the melodic accompanist has never heard of. In the case of today in Carnatic music, the melodic accompaniment is almost always the violin, and suppose we have a vocal concert, the singer may sing a composition that the violinist has probably not even heard, and the violinist is expected to accompany the vocalist. And then we of course have the manodharma aspect, the kalpana sangeetam, or the improvisation, in which the violin is again expected to accompany. Now, how does this happen? Because, as I said, you have a shared tradition. You have trained in this system of music, and you have heard so many concerts and you are able to anticipate. Violin as an instrument was adapted into Carnatic music sometime in the 19th century. It is said that Muthuswami Dikshitar's brother, Balaswami Dikshidhar, was a pioneer, and he tried to play Carnatic music on the violin. So also Vadivelu of the Tanjore quartet that I have mentioned, he too played Carnatic music on the violin, and soon it caught on, and today a Carnatic concert is almost inconceivable without the violin. There was a time, and even today there are experiments with other kinds of accompaniment, very rare of course, but these experiments do happen, and Veena used to be an accompanying instrument, and in many respects it is it would give a very different musical experience. The experience of Carnatic music, how we feel, how we experience Carnatic music is to a large extent determined by the nature of the accompaniment. Both the melodic and the percussive accompaniment determine the Carnatic experience to a large extent. So we have the melodic accompaniment and percussive accompaniment. Sometimes on stage you may also see some, especially when you have a senior performer, you may see one or two other people accompanying the performer, the singer, and most likely his students who lend support. But that is another kind of accompaniment, but it does not really contribute much to the concert as a whole. It is just supportive of the lead performer. And of course you always have the Tambura accompaniment, somebody playing the tambura. Though it seems a very simple matter, physically it is very taxing to sit and play the tambura or the tambura for 2 hours or 2.5 hours, and it does involve some technique and training to be able to play the tambura properly, so that the right kind of atmosphere is created. So today we are focusing on the melodic and percussive accompaniment in Carnatic music. Melodic accompaniment, as I said, is almost always the violin. Now what does the violinist do by way of accompanying? When we talk of the two aspects of Carnatic music, Kalpita and Kalpana, when the lead performer is performing a composition, the violinist is expected to follow. If the violinist knows the composition well and good, and even if he knows the composition, there is very likely some subtle, minute differences between the way the violinist knows the composition and the way the lead performer knows it. So all this has to be factored in, when the violinist has to be all the time on his toes. The violinist has to be very alert, anticipating, listening very keenly to what, not just listening, he has to also be observing. So you see in a concert, the violinist and the percussion, the mridangam artist, they are not just playing, they are all the time looking at the lead performer. And when it comes to Kalpana Sangeetam, improvisation, suppose it's an alapana, again the violinist follows. Here obviously it's going to be very difficult, because you won't really know what the singer, let's say the lead performer is a singer, there's no way of knowing exactly what the singer is going to sing. But given that it's this particular raga, the violinist will know what the raga is and how it goes, how exactly the phrases are going to be formed, how they are going to be delivered. That is where improvisation lies, and the violinist has a tough job on hand. But they accompany in any case, and at least the tail end of the phrases are usually performed. There are gaps between phrases in an alapana. Those are softly filled in by the violinist with the tail end of the vocalist phrases. If you listen carefully, you will know what I am talking about. In Carnatic music, the Manodharma aspects, whatever Manodharma or improvisation the lead performer engages in, the violinist responds, if not equally, at least to a measured level. So, if the vocalist performs an alapana, the violinist accompanies him through the alapana, and then after the vocalist has finished his alapana, the violinist will give a solo presentation of that raga. He will also perform an alapana. Now, this is the way, this is the role of the accompanist. It's pretty well defined in Carnatic music, where the violinist has to come in, where the mridangam player comes in, what are their solo segments. There are very fairly clear conventions regarding these. Unlike, for instance, Hindustani music, where it's entirely up to the lead performer to determine when the accompanists could have their own solo forays. So, the violinist responds with his or her alapana. So, also with the other segments of other aspects of Manodharma. The violinist, suppose the singer performs Swara Prastara, another aspect of Manodharma, the violinist will respond. So, in these areas, especially of Manodharma and especially of Swara Prastara and Neraval, the violinist's contribution is not just to follow and to respond, but to actually provoke the lead singer on, and the lead singer will in turn provoke the violinist, and this kind of interaction and prodding happens all the time in Carnatic music. In fact, the level of interaction in Carnatic music among the performers on stage is of a very high order, since nothing almost is completely determined. Even compositions, there is a very real uncertainty about how exactly they will be presented by the lead performer. So, there has to be a great deal of anticipation and interaction among the performers, and that is also what makes Carnatic music a very live and sometimes raw experience. In the sense, as I said, the violin cannot entirely anticipate and completely accurately anticipate what the lead performer is going to sing, and yet they do accompany, and some level, sometimes there is a rough edgedness to it, to the music, which connoisseurs we learn to overlook, that kind of rough edgedness. That is part of the musical experience, that is part of the creation of music that happens in Carnatic music. Of course, if a violinist has performed very often with a particular vocalist, they would more or less know the style of that vocalist, and they would be able to respond, they would be able to follow more accurately. But there is never, it is never the case that everything is perfectly in place. Now, as I said, there are well understood and widely accepted conventions regarding how regarding the role of the violinist or the mridangam player. This is called the Kacheri Dharma, some principles that are to be abided by in a concert. So, if let us say the vocalist performs an alapana in a particular raga, it is expected that the violinist will respond with the same raga. And the violinist should try to complement the vocalist's performance. It cannot be completely divergent and in a completely different style or completely different speed. There has to be an attempt to maintain the overall coherence of the performance. So, if the vocalist has sung say Raga Bhairavi and using mostly softer phrases and more leisurely treatment of Bhairavi, suppose this is what the vocalist has presented, then the violinist should try to keep to that style, keep to that laya, and so on. Because see, in a musical presentation like a Carnatic music presentation, where there is nothing written, there are no written scores, there has to be somebody who has to take lead, and that is the lead performer, the singer or one instrumentalist. He or she takes the lead and the others have to join in. That is only that alone can make for a coherent musical experience. So, again in terms of duration, if the vocalist has sung for say 10 minutes and alapana for 10 minutes, the violinist typically plays for 6 or 7 minutes, never exceeding 10 definitely. And that is seen as inappropriate. Again Swara Prastara, again if the vocalist is performing Swara Prastara at a certain region of the raga, then the violinist also generally confines herself to that region. So, the violinist's role is to be very keenly aware of the vocalist style and what the vocalist is doing, all in the larger interest of the coherence of the presentation. If everybody on stage was doing his or her own thing, then the experience of the concert will be difficult to absorb.